Hi TBN family, welcome to TBN Meets. I'm really excited to introduce you to my guest today. I met her earlier this year when we were in Israel shooting a documentary on the persecuted church. And it's great to finally be able to introduce you to her. Susan, welcome to TBN Meets.
Thank you very much.
You're a Christian. Yes. But you love working with the Jewish people, don't you?
Yes, I do.
I'd love to talk to you about that. Do you have Jewish blood?
Not that we know of. Nothing to prove.
Maybe somewhere in the past.
Maybe somewhere.
It would be great to get to know you a little. If you could tell us where you were born and where you're living now.
Well, I was born in the United States, in Pennsylvania. Grew up there, brought up my family there. I sort of migrated south after that because I was in the movie theater industry, and I moved up into the corporate end, ended up in Texas, and from there I moved to Israel, and that's where I live now, north of Haifa in the city of Akko. And
when did you become a Christian? Did you grow up Christian?
I did. I was 5 years old, and our church had the hell and damnation preachers, and he literally scared it out of me. And so when I was 5, I was terrified that if I didn't do something right away, I was in trouble.
You just mentioned the film industry. Tell me a little bit about that, early days.
The early days of what we do now? Well, it was 2004 in January when I went to Israel, but I have to say that I went as a very angry person because I didn't want to be there. I didn't want anything to do with Israel. I didn't want anything to do with being there in any way. But my parents had brought me up that you obey your authority, and my authority was God, and God told me to go. And so I went. But I literally told him that I was unhappy about it. And of course, it's very interesting that the one thing I told the Lord a long time ago, I will do anything for you, but please don't give me old people. So of course, our work is with the oldest in the world. So he has that sense of humor, but he knew what I was made for. And after I went in obedience, did exactly what he said, and approached them in the way he told me, then I fell in love with the survivors. Just by touching the first one, I absolutely fell in love with them. God planned it.
He planned it, and he equips us for it, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yes, you don't have to have it before you go. He'll give it to you when you need it.
I've learned to be very afraid of the I will nevers.
Oh, don't say that. No.
Never say that, because that's exactly what will... And I think it's part of dying to ourselves and growing in Christ and getting to where we need to go. You started a charity in that era. Did you go because of filmmaking first?
No, the filmmaking I just sort of fell into, and it wasn't actually filmmaking, but it was the other end, the movie theater business, so that it was showing them. But I learned, and it's kind of interesting, it's helpful now, I learned to be a theater manager and to be in charge of theaters with a budget of 0. So you get very creative.
As Christians, we do need to be able to work with 0 budgets. It's one of the first skills of being called, I suppose. Yes. So once you got there, the calling, how specific was God about your calling, and what did he tell you to do?
He just told me that I had to go and visit Holocaust survivors. And I hadn't thought about the Holocaust since high school. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I literally got there angry with God, told him, I'm here, now what? And he just told me, go and visit them, hug them, kiss them, love them, tell them I love them and you do too. But he gave me a very unusual command after that. He said, but don't tell them about me. I was like, what? Thought that's what I was here for. He said, no, I want to do it. I didn't understand that. And it took me a while to understand that. You know, when we think about the fact that God spoke to Abraham, he spoke to all of the Jews, he speaks to us, why would we think he can't speak to them? And he does. So we are the light, and lights don't speak. And we are the plow, we go in and plow up the stony heart. But God didn't give us seed or water or gardening tools. He gave us what we need to be the forerunner, like John the Baptist. And we go in and we visit them and we love them without conditions. And they respond.
And they respond. And out of that visiting, which started quite informally, I suppose.
Very.
Very informally, and with no budget, something greater came of that. Something more formal, more structured came of that. Your organization, can you tell us about that?
Well, for about 2 years, I was just visiting. And again, no budget, no money. I only went to Israel with $50. And it didn't occur to me that that wasn't enough. But God seems to have taken care of me.
Just take your shoes and the coat on your back.
And just go, and it worked. I mean, He took care of everything. And I did not understand the visa system of another country or anything, so I went back and forth for a little bit. The ministry office was very kind to me and let me stay longer at times. But after about 2 years, I sat with friends in the United States and I said, do you think we need to make this formal? And so we did. And then a few years later, we formed an amutah, or a charity, in Israel as well. So we have it on both ends.
Called?
That one is called Shefa Tikva, which is Abundant Hope International in Hebrew. And the two of them, what it does is what I can get from the United States and from other countries and what I can get from Israel are two different things. And so they meet in the middle. And one of the things that we can get through the charity, which we're hoping to put into place this next year, is the IDF can give us volunteers. And this, to me, is perfect, to be able to bring the soldiers in, working with the survivors, which is actually going to bring in a whole new initiative that we will be bringing in veterans with PTSD from the United States. And we're talking about bringing in Britain as well, to meet with the IDF soldiers who have PTSD and meeting the survivors who also suffer from the same thing.
Of the Holocaust.
Of the Holocaust. You're talking about the victims of the war meeting the victors of the war.
Yes. Your book, which I loved, by the way, read it. I told you just now that my 11-year-old son, Kian, just gobbled it up in 2 days and couldn't stop talking about it during our dinners and lunches. He would just, it would come to his memory. And when you were talking about PTSD now, I remembered reading about one, this little book is beautiful. It's called Why is Great Grandma So Sad? At the back of the book, you have a very special section, which is photographs, color photographs of actual survivors, obviously
Yes.
people that you work with,
Yes.
with their names and their stories. And it looks something like this. And there was one specifically, and I actually want to read it to you if that's okay. It says, what she remembers most, her name is Evangelina, is that right?
Evgenia.
Yes.
Evgenia.
She said what she remembers most about the war was starving. When she speaks of it, she cries and shakes.
Yes.
She cries and shakes, and she must be how old now?
She's over 80.
Over 80 years old, and still when she speaks of it, she cries and she shakes. It really shook me reading that. There were many of the testimonies that touched my heart, but that specific one where she's that old and she's still just thinking of the hunger that those people had to go through and what she had to experience, she still physically reacts to it.
Their memories are part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a DVD that constantly goes on day and night.
Yes.
They can't forget it. And that's part of what you find with the people who have PTSD or any kind of trauma.
Yes.
They just can't forget it. She's actually the very first survivor that I met.
Really interesting that she's the one that touched my heart, because her story is one of the shortest in the book.
Yes, yes, it is. But Evgenia, I went into her home angry about having to visit. And I left her home falling absolutely in love with her.
Wow, she was the first part of the puzzle.
She was. She was the beginning.
It's a wonderful book. I read it, and it was written, I suppose, for everybody. It wasn't just,
Yes.
It's written for children, but I think sometimes grown-ups, we like children, we digest information given to us like a child better than what we would if we had to read a very hard-hitting piece of historic writing. This is an easy way to digest it because you do, although you don't leave out details, you don't make it any less horrifying than what it was in your story, you do serve it in a way that you would tell a child. Of what age would you think?
I wanted to target 7 to 11, yes, somewhere in there.
Because I think the character, it starts with the mom talking to her daughter, and she's about 8, I think, in the book.
I think she might be 7 or 8.
Yeah, probably
yes,
7.
Exactly.
Yes. And it's wonderful. It's not an actual survivor story of one single person. Tell us how the story was put together.
I didn't want to feature one survivor because I was trying to do an introduction for the Holocaust to children and to anyone who can't read trauma. And that was actually the beginning of the whole idea. I had people come to me, adults, and say, oh, you're right, I should learn about the Holocaust, but it's too much trauma, I can't read it. And my first thought was, well, how much trauma do you think it was for the people who went through it? You need to know. So I thought, well, let's make it so they can read it. And then I started thinking of all the children who don't know and the parents will not tell. So when I started writing this, I wanted to make sure that I got all of the different experiences as an introduction. What more could I do than take the people that I had met, their particular stories that they told me, and put it together into a fictional family, but it's all factually correct.
I can tell you that just reading through the story, I felt like I had heard the things that you were writing about through different people's accounts of it, because I've seen a lot of documentaries, etc. So it felt very real. I could imagine this being an actual person, which really makes it hard-hitting, I think. But it's given in a way, it's such a wonderful way. You found a door, I think. This is what God was telling me yesterday, is that you found a door into people's hearts because people want everything easy. They want the 2-minute noodles. They want,
yes.
We avoid our own emotions about our own problems by going onto our telephones or switching on our TV just to avoid trauma because our brains are so used to everything just being easy, isn't it? And you have found a door in this culture that we have to not forget. You were talking about a country just now where you have helpers coming in, helping you, that they'd never learned about the Holocaust in school. They didn't know that it happened. Tell us a bit about that.
Some of the people from the former Soviet Union and from Siberia and some of the Russian-speaking countries, but in particular the former Soviet Union and Siberia area, the government had deliberately taken it out. For instance, there's a book called The Black Book of Russian Jewry, which was done by 2 journalists. One was American and one was Russian during the war. And they went around through Ukraine and in the midst of the fighting, taking statements from people of what had just happened to them. It was published in America in English, but it was not published in the Soviet Union until recently.
Wow.
And that's kind of the way that it is, that they don't get the full story if they get the story at all.
But it helps people to understand that because I've seen in the media that there are movements saying that the Holocaust never happened, which I thought was just absurd, and I was hoping that it was just a crazy story. But listening to that this morning, I realized there's maybe something to it, that it's being edited out of our history. I suppose like creationism is being edited out of our human story. They're trying to do the same thing with the Holocaust.
They do, and the ones that do teach the Holocaust, I'm finding it's getting to be a smaller section because there's so much more history than there used to be, and they're relegating it more towards the back. I was actually in a restaurant, and you know how your waiter or waitress will try to get extra tips by just being attentive to you. So they asked me what I did. And when I said I work with the Holocaust survivors, their comment to me was, "Is that a new movie?" or is that a new group? They did not know. And this was in America. There is no reason. But people are not paying attention, and it's not given the weight that it should, because we're seeing this happen again.
Yes.
It's back. It's here. It never left.
Do you feel that that is the reason why you are doing this? The bigger picture? So
The
that people wouldn't
education
forget?
is huge for me. And I was spurred on by the survivors themselves, because every time they knew I was going back to America or going to a different country, why are you going? I'm going to go and speak about the Holocaust. I'm going to go and tell your story. And they would just grab my hands and say, tell them about our story. Tell them not to forget us and remember those who have died. How can I not? I must. And so this is the beginning.
And this is what you wrote for me in August. You said, read, remember, tell others.
Yes.
Read, remember, tell others. I found it so interesting. A while back, I listened to a talk, and someone spoke about the poet W.H. Auden, and he fled from Europe to America, and he was in New York. He was a socialist. He was an atheist, sitting in a movie theater watching a documentary on the war, during the war. And there were some German people sitting in the audience, and it started with a scene of Nazis, soldiers walking into Poland and bayoneting women and children. And instead of outrage, which you would expect from a culture where there's education, because according to atheists, when you have education and good politics and social structures in place, then you won't have chaos.
Yes.
Here they were in New York in this movie theater, and these German people were screaming, kill them, kill them.
Oh my word.
As an atheist, he says, he sat there, he got up, and within 2 minutes, his entire worldview changed, because everything was based on relatives. But what he saw that day was pure and absolute evil. He saw evil that day. And it spurred him on to actually go and look for an absolute answer to this absolute evil, which made him run into Jesus, because it was the only answer he could find to this.
He's the only answer.
He is the only answer to this. So I believe that in telling these things, we are literally proving that evil does exist. And if we are not careful, and if we don't have an absolute behind us, then these things happen.
But isn't it interesting that these people who have been through more horrible things than I can relate. Every time I hear one that is worse than the other, I think that's it. It can't be any worse. Someone will tell me something even more horrible. But yet they are all kind, sweet, and forgiving. And they actually tell me, we do not hold this against the German people. How can they do that without Yeshua? How do they do it without? They know that there's something different about us when we walk in, because we walk in with light, and we walk in with Yeshua. And when we leave, he stays.
That is amazing.
And we know that he talks to them.
Because the New Testament does say that Abraham and Moses were saved because they believed in the Messiah to come.
Yes.
And that their salvation was in that. And I've also heard quite a few theologians speak about the fact that denying the fact that Jewish people still have a place in God's heart is one of the reasons the Nazis were able to do what they did. Denying Israel and creating an Israel that is just a concept rather than an actual place with real people is one of the reasons that a lot of people speculate why the Nazis were able to do what they did, because surely where were the Christians?
Yes, and early in the time of the Nazi power, Hitler offered to sell the Jews and in some instances give the Jews to other nations. Every nation turned him down. And he said, you see, no one wants them. Therefore, I am free to do as I choose. That's at our feet, that our nations did not come to the rescue at that point. Same thing even when there were negotiations to get the Hungarian Jews. It was 1 year of negotiations, and $5 million was set aside to negotiate with. But the negotiator was told, all right, you have $5 million to negotiate with, but you're not allowed to use any of it. And at the end of 1 year, the Nazis said, you're not real. It's not going to happen. And that's when they took them into Auschwitz and killed them.
Pure evil, isn't it?
Pure evil.
And then you have other stories of hope and light. I think it was a Japanese diplomat.
Yes.
Yes. You know which story I'm thinking
do.
about?
I do.
With the passport? Please tell it, because you'll know it better. I'll tell it secondhand.
I can't say his name, so I'm not even going to try. But this man went against even his own country, who said, why are you giving out visas? Stop. And he didn't. He ignored them, and he kept giving out visas. And the people were climbing over the fences into the embassy, and he was writing them and stamping them on every piece of paper. And then they were coming for him, and the Nazis were going to get him. He was in his car taking scraps of paper that people put in his windows and stamping and signing, throwing them out the window. Even when he got in the train, throwing them out. He did everything he could. Thousands of them he saved.
Thousands.
There were people who were in the midst and making the difference.
Yes.
You know, even the people who saved one. And isn't that what the Jewish people say?
You speak about the one in your book.
Right. Yes, if you save the one, you save the world entire.
Isn't it a beautiful saying?
It
I'm
is.
taking that one and making it one of mine. It's a beautiful
It is.
saying. And
you know, if I can, there's one particular survivor I would like to share her story.
yes, please do.
She was a very special lady to me. Her name was Branislava. And the strength and resilience in this woman just amazed me. She was in her village, and everyone was friendly, and she was in Ukraine. She had her 2 sons, 5 and 2.5. She was on her way to the market. It was her birthday. And she said she was wearing her favorite clothes. When she got into the market, somebody said to her, oh, the Nazi officers have arrived. They're just asking you to register. Well, it was a lie. When everyone got to the center of town, they just pulled them all in. So 2,000 Jews were taken from that village. They were marched down the road and put into a field where they had to wait. She was with her father and her sister and her baby. And they were standing there, and it was becoming dusk, and the temperature was falling. It was raining right now, turning into snow. Water had collected around their feet and froze. So now they're standing in ice, still waiting. And then suddenly they knew why they were there. They heard shooting at the back, and the shooting was coming closer. Her father turned to her and he said, Branislava, after today you will be the only one alive. Pray for us. She said, how can you say that? Just then the man behind them was shot in the neck. He fell down and the shooting stopped. So they're standing there waiting, and she had been holding her 2 boys, which were 2 big strapping boys. She couldn't do it anymore. She put the older one on the chest of the man who was dying. Leonid today tells us, I sat there on his chest and I watched him die. 5 years old. His memory is very sharp on it. But she was standing there, and she said it was completely dark. And they came up and said, the soldiers said, we ran out of enough bullets to kill the rest of you, but we have enough to guard you until we come back with more. And so they were waiting all night to be shot. She reached a point where she could not do it anymore. She said even with her feet encased in ice, she fell to her knees, holding her younger son. And she said, Lord, please save my children. And she said suddenly there was a Nazi officer in front of her. He wasn't there, and then he was. And he helped her stand, and he said, I've come to help you save your children. He broke the ice. She scooped up her other son, and he led her and her 2 boys to the edge of the field. He said, "You wait here." She described the watch in his hand. 20 minutes, I'll be back. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. She said, "We're not waiting." She stood up, took her boys, and walked away. There's a monument at that place in Ukraine that says 2,000 Jews were brought here. 1,997 were shot and 3 survived. And she said to me, "I know who it is that saved me. And I know that it was God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he sent someone to save my children because I asked." Wow. And she told me, she said, "When I die, you look for me in heaven, you'll see me." I believe it.
I think with the Reformation, it's one of the saddest lies that didn't get reformed is the idea that Israel really consists of Jewish people. And it's so easy to see it in the Word, isn't it? Old and New Testament, that God said through Abraham that he will never let them go.
Right.
Never is never. What I know about my God, when he says never, never is never.
Exactly. Yes.
I would love it if you could pray for people. I know that this topic that we discussed today is a slightly somber one, but I think it's one of hope. We need to keep the truth alive, because the truth is what will set us free, and the truth really starts in Jesus, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It's and the hope, that is what they hang on to. And that's why we named it Abundant Hope International. We want to bring them hope, and we do. And they even comment on it. And they even say, "There's something about you. We see a glow." I've had so many of them say, "We see a glow around you." What is that? It's the hope. And we must bring the hope. But the hope is for all of us. It's not just for survivors. It's for every person.
Yes, because we all survive something, don't we?
Absolutely. And you know, this is one of the things that I teach when I go out. What survivor is in your life? Survivor of cancer, divorce, abuse. They're survivors of everything. And we need to reach out to them.
Yes.
Be the one who makes the difference and brings them
The
hope.
one who makes the difference. I'm so sorry that we've run out of time, but I do want you to still pray for maybe pray for hope. I think that's an easy one, because you know all about hope.
Okay.
You can look straight into the camera and just pray for our viewers.
Lord, we ask that you will bring hope to the people who are listening right now. For you are the great hope. You are the one, Yeshua HaMashiach, the great Messiah. We ask that you will bring hope to the people as they watch, as they pray, as they listen, as they ask. For how else do you get anything unless you ask? So please ask. Lord, we just ask that you will give them hope, that you will come and give it to the survivors and to every person who is seeing this right now. Please, Lord, let us be the hope as well. In the name of Yeshua.
Thank you so much, Susan. Bless you. Bless the work that you do and those who work with you for abundance, so that you don't have to do it with nothing, but with abundance. Absolutely. Thank you to our viewers that joined us today here with Susan in our London studios. Till next time, be blessed.